The January wind screamed over the Wyoming flats like a wounded beast, driving curtains of snow into Daniel's heart. His weather-scarred face, he tugged his coat closer and urged his horse forward through the drifts. 3 days on the trail from Sheridan had left him bone-weary and longing for his own hearth. But the storm had other intentions. Through the swirling white a familiar fence line appeared, the Keaton property. Its plain farmhouse stood lonely but proud, a thin column of smoke curling from its chimney. Daniel frowned when his eyes caught a crude board nailed to the gatepost, "For sale, Sam Keaton selling." That did add up. The man had poured his lifeblood into this ground. 160 acres of stubborn soil and patchy grass didn't look like much, but it held something rarer than gold, water rights to Silver Creek. Whoever controlled the creek controlled prosperity when the railway came through. Daniel guided his mount into the yard. As he swung down, the farmhouse door opened. A woman stepped out, shawl clutched at her shoulders, pale as moonlight against the storm. "Heart," she said, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "Claire." Daniel touched his hat, saw the sun. "Where is Sam?" Her jaw tightened. Behind her, a small face peeked from the window. Emily, their little girl, maybe 6 now. Claire's eyes filled, but her voice stayed firm. "Sam passed. Pneumonia. 2 weeks ago." The news struck like a hammer. Sam Keaton, loyal neighbor, steadfast friend, gone. Daniel swallowed hard. "I am sorry, Claire. Sam was a good man." She nodded once, gesturing toward the barn. "Stable your horse. Coffee. It's hot if you need to warm up." Inside the barn, Daniel noted the disorder, loose boards, underfed livestock, hay stacked carelessly. Sam would never have allowed it. The weight of running a frontier farm alone was already pressing on the widow. When he stepped into the kitchen, the warmth hit like a blessing. Claire poured coffee from a battered pot. Emily sat sketching with a bit of charcoal. "That is a fine horse you were drawing," Daniel said gently. "It's Papa's horse, Maple," Emily replied. "Mr. Crowell took her yesterday." Claire stiffened. "Emily, go check the chickens." The child obeyed reluctantly, leaving her mother pale and weary at the table. "Crowell has been here?" Daniel asked. "Every day since Sam died." Claire's voice cracked. "He holds the note on our loan, says it is due in full now. Offered half what the place is worth. If I don't sell, the sheriff forecloses by month end." Her hands clenched around the cup. "I've asked everyone Sam knew, Bank One, to extend credit to a widow. I've got $17 to my name, and a daughter who keeps asking why her papa won wake up." Daniel stared into his coffee. His own ranch, 20 miles north, was steady but empty. Sam had once saved him from rustlers, asking nothing in return. Now Sam, as widow, faced ruin. "What about the water rights?" Daniel asked. "That is what Crowell wants," she said bitterly. "Railroad is coming and water means fortune. He's got friends in the company." Daniel rose and paced to the mantel where Sam's daguerreotype stood, Sam proud and young beside Claire, baby Emily in her arms. A family is future now hanging by a thread. The thought came sudden and wild, reckless but maybe the only way. A marriage of convenience, under territorial law married woman. S property became her husband, but creditors could force a sale without both spouses' consent. It would buy time, Daniel said slowly. "Not charity, a business arrangement. Marry me." Silence filled the room. Claire's face flushed, then paled. "I beg your pardon. Hear me out. Legal marriage protects the property. Crowell can foreclose without my agreement. I pay off the loan. You and Emily stay home. I get water access and help with the ranch, and maybe I do right by Sam's memory." She sank into a chair, hands trembling. "You were serious, dead serious. People will talk. Let them. I can Sam, as barely in the ground. Sam would want you and Emily safe." She studied him. Daniel Hart once handsome. Sun and wind had carved too many lines into his face, but his gray eyes were steady, honest. Stories said he was fair with his men, brutal with rustlers, a man who kept his word, even when it cost him. "It would be a business arrangement only," she said carefully. "Separate bedrooms. I wouldn't be beholden for wifely duties." "Understood," Daniel said. His ears burned, but he meant it. "Partners, nothing more." Before she could answer, a child's cry cut through the house. "Mama, there's a man coming." Missed Crowell, as carriage. Claire's face drained of color. Heavy boots thudded on the porch. Daniel touched her arm. "Let me." He opened the door. Silas Crowell stood smug in his fine black coat, flanked by hired muscle. Claire was trembling when Daniel closed the door. 3 days, she whispered. "Then we'd better move fast," he said. "My offer still stands. But you need to decide now." Claire's gaze went to the stairs where Emily listened in silence. She thought of Sam, of promises made, of the future slipping through her fingers. Most of all, she thought of her daughter as safety. "All right," she said softly. "God help us both, but all right." Daniel nodded. The storm outside raged on, but inside that farmhouse 2 desperate souls wagered everything on a marriage that might save them, or destroy them both. The wedding took place in the tiny wooden chapel at the edge of town. Snow was still deep on the ground, and the cold cut the air like glass. Only the preacher, 2 witnesses, and a silent child were there. Claire wore a plain gray dress, her hands stiff and cold. Daniel stood beside her in his trail-worn coat, hat pressed to his chest. The preacher's words were simple, hurried. When he asked Daniel if he would take Claire as his wife, Daniel's voice was steady. "I will." When he asked Claire, her answer came like a whisper carried by the wind. "I will." No music, no flowers, no celebration, just a vow spoken before God, binding 2 people together who had little choice. Daniel slipped a thin gold band, Sam's old wedding ring, onto Claire's finger. She did not look up at him. Afterward, Claire helped Emily into her cloak and led her out of the church. Daniel followed, a man married but feeling more like a guardian stepping into uncharted land. Back at the farm, reality set in quickly. There were animals to feed, fences to mend, and debts to settle. Daniel moved into the spare room downstairs, leaving Claire and Emily their space. He worked dawn to dusk, hammering boards, patching roofs, splitting wood until his muscles screamed. At first Claire watched in silence. She cooked meals, washed clothes, and tended to Emily, but kept a wall around her heart. Daniel felt it every time she avoided his gaze, every time she said "Mr. Hart" instead of Daniel. But Emily was different. She followed him around the yard, peppering him with questions. "Why do horses sleep standing up? Can I ride with you? Do you think Papa can see us from heaven?" That last one always stopped him cold. Daniel would crouch to her level, brushing her hair back gently. "I reckon he can, sweetheart, and I reckon he's proud of you." Sometimes Claire overheard those words. Sometimes when Daniel thought she wasn't looking, she saw her eyes soften. One evening after supper, Claire brought out the ledger where Sam had tracked every cent. "The note is $200, she said quietly. "Crowell means to squeeze us dry." "I've got it covered," Daniel replied. Her head snapped up. "Covered? With what money?" "I sold 20 head of cattle last spring, been saving the cash, enough to pay Crowell and keep us breathing a while." Her eyes widened. "You give that up for us?" "For Emily," he said, "and for Sam. He saved my life once, maybe twice. I never forgot." Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. The next morning Daniel rode into town with the money. Crowell's office smelled of cigar smoke and arrogance. Daniel slapped the bills onto the desk. "That settles the Keaton note," Daniel said flatly. Crowell counted slowly, lips curling. "Did think you had it in you, Hart. But paying her debts one change a thing. The railroad will come, and when it does, that water will be mine. You can't stop it." Daniel leaned close. "We'll see." Crowell smirked, but for the first time Daniel saw a flicker of unease. Days bled into weeks. Slowly something began to change between Claire and Daniel. She started leaving extra biscuits on his plate. She mended his shirts without being asked. One night, when Emily had a fever, they sat together at her bedside, shoulders touching, keeping watch until dawn. Neither spoke of it, but a bond was forming, quiet as snowfall. Still doubt lingered. Claire often stood at the window, staring at the horizon where Sam once rode in from the fields. Daniel knew she still grieved, still felt trapped by the bargain they had made. Then came the fire. It started in the barn, a sudden blaze tearing through dry hay. Daniel woke to Emily's screams. He ran barefoot into the cold, throwing buckets of water, battling flames that clawed at the sky. Claire rushed out with Emily, her face white with terror. Daniel saw shadows in the firelight, figures slipping away into the dark. Hired men, Crowell's men. By dawn the barn was ash, 2 horses dead, supplies ruined. Claire collapsed onto the steps, shaking. "He'll never stop, will he?" Daniel knelt beside her, smoke blackening his skin. Not while he thinks you're alone. He took her hand gently. But you're not alone anymore. Not now. For the first time, Claire looked straight into his eyes. In that moment, she saw not just a man honoring a promise, but someone willing to fight, bleed, and burn for, and Emily. Her walls began to crack. Weeks later, as winter eased, Daniel returned from town with news. Crowell has hired more men, he said grimly. He means to drive us off by force. Claire's face paled. What can we do? Daniel's jaw set. Stand our ground, but it wouldn't be easy. Claire reached for his arm. For the first time, her touch was not out of fear, but out of trust. And for Daniel, it lit a spark he hadn't felt in years, a spark he dared not name but could no longer deny. Because somewhere in this marriage of necessity, love had begun to take root. The thaw of spring brought more than green shoots to the Wyoming flats. It brought trouble riding hard and mean under Silas Crowell's command. Word spread fast that Crowell had gathered a half-dozen gunmen, men with no conscience and no loyalty beyond the coins in their pockets. Everyone in town knew where they were headed, the Keaton farm. Daniel prepared in silence. He reinforced doors, set rifles where he could reach them, and drilled Emily on where to hide if danger came. Claire moved with him, not asking him to stop, only keeping Emily close. The fear in her eyes was sharp, but so was her resolve. She was tired of being hunted, tired of Crowell's shadow over her home. The night before the storm, Claire came to Daniel's room. She carried 2 mugs of coffee, her hands trembling only slightly. You've done more than I ever asked, she said quietly, more than I deserve. Daniel set down his rifle. You and Emily deserve better than Crowell's threat. That's all I am trying to give you. Her eyes glistened. And what about you, Daniel? What do you deserve? For once he had no answer. They stood there in silence, the air thick with words unsaid. At last, she reached out and touched his hand. For the first time since the wedding it was, out of duty or gratitude. It was something deeper, fragile but real. Daniel's heart pounded, but he did move, did break the moment. At dawn the riders came. Dust clouded the horizon as Crowell's men thundered across the plain. Daniel stood at the fence line, rifle in hand, jaw set. Claire and Emily watched from the porch. Fear etched across their faces. Crowell pulled his horse to a halt a few yards away, sneer curling his lips. Step aside, Hart. This land was never yours. You think marrying a widow changes the game? I'll burn this place to the ground before I let you keep what's mine. It was never yours, Crowell. Daniel's voice was steady. Not when Sam lived. Not now. You want it? You all have to take it. Crowell's men shifted uneasily, hands on their guns. For a long moment it looked like blood would spill across the snow-dusted fields. Then a shout rose from behind. Townsfolk were coming. 6 ranchers, farmers, even the preacher. Men Sam had helped. Men who remembered his kindness. They stood with rifles at their sides, forming a wall behind Daniel. Crowell's sneer faltered. This isn't over, Hart? Yes, it is, Daniel said. You ride out now or you stay here under 6 feet of dirt. Your choice. Crowell's eyes burned with hate. But he was a fool. Outnumbered, outgunned, he spat into the dust and wheeled his horse around. His men followed, sullen and silent. Soon the dust cloud faded, leaving only the quiet of the plains. When it was over, Claire collapsed against Daniel, her body trembling with relief. Emily clung to his leg, crying into the fabric of his coat. For the first time since Sam's death, the farm felt safe. Days passed, and life slowly returned to normal. But something had shifted. One evening, after Emily had gone to bed, Claire found Daniel sitting on the porch, staring at the stars. She sat beside him, folding her hands in her lap. You risked everything for us, she said softly. Not just your money, your life. Daniel shook his head. I did what Sam would have wanted, what any man with a conscience would have done. She turned to him then, her eyes steady, no longer guarded. No, Daniel, you did more. You gave Emily a father again, and you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, hope. The silence between them stretched, but this time it was warm, not cold. Claire reached for his hand, and Daniel held it without hesitation. In that simple touch they both knew the truth. This was no longer just a marriage of necessity, it was something real, born in hardship but strong enough to last. By summer the farm was thriving again. The fields were green, the livestock healthy, and laughter often drifted from the farmhouse windows. Daniel and Claire worked side by side, not as strangers bound by a paper vow, but as partners, as husband and wife in every sense. One evening Emily ran through the fields, chasing fireflies. Daniel watched her and smiled. Claire slipped her arm through his, resting her head lightly against his shoulder. "You know," she whispered, "maybe God, His plan, was bigger than we could see. Maybe He sent you here not just to save this land, but to save us." Daniel kissed her hair gently, his heart finally at peace. "And maybe He sent you to save me, too." As the sun sank behind the Wyoming hills, painting the sky in gold and crimson, the widow who had once stood alone no longer feared the future, because she had found love again, unexpected and unshakable, in the man who had married her to save her land and ended up saving her. Closing voice soft, thank you for listening. If you felt moved by this story, please like and subscribe so more folks can hear tales like this.